Talk about what makes sense here.
Before COVID-19, you guys have these programs are running out. The fact that we are, even considering ending an eviction moratorium as soon as the end of this year is absolutely ridiculous. And I think the reason it's happening is because, landlords and property owners have a lot of sway in our state and local governments. And, it's up to us to kind of represent the other side, like, tenants and kind of...
That's all I needed. How do you spell your last name?
Now getting it right. So we need it.
Thank you. You want to give out the first name just so everybody can give you a shout out?
Yes, my name is Ruby James Saucer.
Ruby James Saucer.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Have a good day. Look who we got out here, bro. That's a Porter, man. Official street resistor, man.
There you go.
Out here. What's up, bro?
Hey, good to see you, my man. Good to see you.
Hey, listen, I couldn't find the YouTube channel.
You spelled the name wrong. It's N-E-Z-E-R. You put N-E-Z-Z-A. I saw yours, though. That's okay.
N-E-Z-E-R?
No, N-E-Z-E-R.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so I made a mistake. This Nuzzer Raw, I put Nuzzer Raw. The correct spelling is N-E-Z-E-R.
There you go.
Last name is Porter, and you can find him on YouTube. You got street clips on police accountability on YouTube.
I do have that out there, yes sir.
Yeah, so y'all can go there.
Yeah.
Please don't pay attention to what I put in the video. I misheard what he said.
That's okay.
N-E-Z-E-R, last name Porter. First name N-E-Z-E-R. Y'all can find him on YouTube.
Yes,
Shout outs to Nuzzer Porter, y'all. Official street. You're the first person I gave a resistor badge to, man.
All right.
You earned it because when I'm out here, you out here. So it's only right, bro.
I try to be out there as much as I can, you know?
Appreciate you,
yes,
bro.
sir.
Appreciate you out here. I finally got somebody, well, I'm not going to say I influenced me, but what I will say is there's somebody out here that's recording alongside with me. Everybody should record.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm going to float around. I'm going to catch up with you.
I'm going to catch up to you, my man.
Yeah.
All right, we got the resistance here. You know, we met up a few months ago and a few rallies and a few crime scenes. So he got a YouTube page called The Resistance. You can check him out. Good man. He's pretty much at most of the activities that happen in the greater Boston area. If he's not there, I'm there. Or Zazito the Penis there. One of us are there. And we're going to try to see what we see out here.
However, with the opening of schools and colleges, I imagine that there will be something. And it also worries me because I hate that we have to look at other and speak to that in order to potentially change what we're doing. That way is very heavy.
As a teacher, what are your concerns in terms of this pandemic is going to kind of exacerbate the sort of inequities we already see sort of in the school system? And there's so many students about students who are already kind of falling behind or falling even further behind. Is there a way that we can assuage kind of those sort of like detrimental effects sort of as much as possible?
Yeah, I think the way to do that would be to prioritize remote learning, because no matter what, we will have to be remote in some capacity, whether or not we choose a hybrid plan or a remote model. There's no way that we can go back to full in-person learning. So that means, and we understand that the teaching that we did in the spring was not sufficient, but that was not remote learning, it was crisis learning. We were told to change our curriculums overnight, adapt them for online circumstances, and that takes a lot more preparation than we had and a lot more resources than we had. So my priority, and I believe that our priority as a school district, should be working on getting high quality remote learning now and preparing so that we are able to provide high quality education for our students throughout the year. And then once we have that down, then we can start thinking about how to safely phase back in some of our highest need students for whom in-person learning is the most helpful.
Right. Are you worried about your students, especially for those who have maybe irregular internet access or none at all, or who have parents who aren't comfortable with the technology? You know, what can the school district, I don't think it should be the responsibility of teachers, and what can the school district, city, the state do, you know, particularly for these families who may not be as technologically, you know, equipped as others?
Yeah. So I think one thing, giving credit where credit is due. I think that BPS did a good job of distributing technology in the spring. We were able to react pretty quickly, get a bunch of new Chromebooks out to students, making sure that they had that. Wi-Fi was more of a challenge, so I think that would be something that I would want to push on politicians. We should have free Wi-Fi available for our families. It's a public necessity, and I don't understand why we don't treat it as such, why we treat it as a privilege. And in addition to that, I think that we need parent forums and we need parent training sessions so that parents know how to navigate a lot of these online tools that they might not have had experiences with before.
Right. So I'm curious, how is your experience then doing the kind of the crisis remote learning, as you termed it, in the spring? I mean, were your students logging on regularly? Or you know, and what seems to be the biggest sort of challenges with that your students are facing?
So I did have a lot of students show up. I teach middle school, and so I was able, and I had a good relationship with a lot of my students and parents, so I was able to get many people online. However, it's just a challenge whenever you're asking families. It's difficult when we're saying these are the things that need to be done, but it's also on families' time. Like they have jobs. A lot of my students take care of younger siblings. And so a lot of the time, if we're saying we need you to do this now, it's just not a reality for our students. So we need to make sure that we can provide multiple ways of accessing that learning, whether or not they can attend that class at that exact time. It's important to have still high quality work for them.
They're supposed to be here.
And then I would also say, yeah, what you were saying about Wi-Fi connection was definitely an issue. People were really struggling with that. And as far as teaching, it's very difficult to teach on Zoom, especially if you're only one person, because you need to be teaching the content, you need to monitor the weight room, the chat, you're texting parents to make sure that their students are getting online. It's like 5 jobs rolled into one. And so that's another reason why I think Boston's plan, it hinges on teachers teaching in person and on Zoom at the exact same time. And from my experience, that's just not feasible.
Becca, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Good job.
So, what time is it? Yeah, my rank was at 12:34. I know this is at 12:30.
Not half of it.
Absolutely. All you need is a Zoom link.
Housing, health, economy, payment, jobs, very important. Okay? Okay, thank you all. We're gonna have to sign off because the event's gonna start now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start in a few, so just bear with us. How you doing, my man?
I think we gotta get this started so that
Wow. I ain't even told me I got it first. Recorded that one live. So a lot of people didn't know that information right there. That was a good piece of information. It took us 6 years. We had to educate our people ourselves. Wow. So they were for slavery. And for all these hundreds of years, we've been calling this Dudley with a community of black people.
Yeah, well, I mean, black folk pretty much came in the last few decades. Just before that, was primarily
All
white.
matters. When we came through, we called it Dudley.
Yeah, exactly.
And that man and his family, the whole bloodline was in support of slavery. All right, ladies and gentlemen, y'all got it free. Can I get a first name just so they can give you a shout out, bro?
Sadiq.
Sadiq.
Oh, Sadiqi. Sadiqi Gabon. Nice to meet you, my man. I know exactly who you are.
What's up?
Assalamu alaikum. All right. Couldn't recognize you with the mask on, but I know you've been around for years. I know exactly who you are. Good to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Sadiqi Gabon. He's an activist that's been in the community for years. Yeah, that's Sadiqi Gabon, right? You know him. He used to be on WILD back in the day.
WID?
WILD radio station on Warren Street.
Okay.
Yeah, he's going way back there. That's way back.
Significant piece of information right there. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff going on we don't know about, man.
Nubian Square, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, we just.
Nubian Square is the official name that I'm calling. No longer.
They're trying to stop evictions, trying to educate the young, and a whole lot more.
My name is Susan Chiamaka, S-U-S-A-N-C-H-I-H-A-M-E-K-W-E, and I'm coming from
Good morning, everyone.
Leadership,
Just ask that you all come a little closer. I know we got social
And
we're here to support, you know, the non-eviction.
My name is Queen.
And
I'm on
this is
leadership
just
team
a
City
terrible
Life,
time for
and we
people
are
because
great. It's
this virus
so
is
great
really
to
out
see
of
you all
control.
here.
And
Thank
a lot
you
of
for
people
coming.
don't
And
have,
at this time, I'm going to
they don't have a
introduce you
choice
to
in how their lives are going.
Judy Burnett
So
from
one
City
thing
Life.
that's
She's an
important is for people
organizer.
to have
She's the
shelter.
bomb. She can tell
Because
you
I don't
a little
think
bit more.
things can, you know, things are going to get worse if people are displaced. Things are going to be really out of control. It's unfortunate that, you know, our government is not really doing anything solid or assuring people of anything. But we're here to support, you know, this bill to make sure that people in Boston, Massachusetts, and everywhere else don't get evicted. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
The first person that I want to introduce is a person that who is here. I asked him to be here because he was the driving force in changing the Lovely Square to Nubian Square. And I want people to see him and have him explain a little bit about the purpose of that change and the significance of that change. So everybody, let's welcome Siddiqui. Siddiqui Campbell.
Thank you, Judy. Just want to welcome everyone to Nubian Square. And my name is Siddiqui Campbell, and I'm the director of the Black Community Information Center and chair of the Nubian Square Coalition, which is a program of the Black Community Information Center. And just for a quick history to let up to why we're here today, is that the Black Community Information Center is all volunteer organization. Been involved in a lot of work out here in the community. We led the effort to have the former Washington Park renamed Malcolm X Park, New Dudley Street to Malcolm X Boulevard. We actually laid the groundwork, if we will, for what became the Mecca Mall up in Grove Hall. And so what has happened is after we had the name change for New Dudley Street to Malcolm X Boulevard, we said, well, and let me preface my comments by saying, folks always talk about what a great job I did. The bottom line is that nothing would have been done if it wasn't for the good people like yourselves that work with me to make it happen. So anyhow, our next target was the square, because we felt that it made no sense that our primary commercial shopping district was named after a family that supported slavery. You had Thomas Dudley in the 1600s as governor who led the effort to have slavery legalized in the state, and his son carried on that tradition. So 6 years ago, we made a determination at the Information Center that we were in fact going to move towards a name change here. And we got so much support from the community that it evolved into the Nubian Square Coalition. We had black businesses, churches, mosques, neighborhood associations, young people right across the board. So essentially what happened was that last March, we met with the mayor. There was an agreement that would be a ballot question, non-binding, and on November 5th, the past election, which you're aware of, certain wards and precincts in the area voted overwhelmingly in favor of changing the name of Dudley Square to Nubian Square. And so that's why we're here today at Nubian Square. Now, let me just say very quickly is that a lot of folks were saying, well, changing the name is just a symbolic act. We just said that that was our first step. We have the Nubian Square Business Group that's dealing with the developers, because you need to understand that the square is a hot spot in the city of Boston right now. And there are developers all over the place, whether it be the Blair's parking lot, Haley House, right over here next to the library that's being renovated. And let me just also mention the fact that because of the overwhelming vote in favor of the square being renamed, that the MBTA made the decision to change the name of the station to Nubian Station. So we have Nubian Square and Nubian Station. So we're working on the library. You might have heard that a name was made for the library, Roxbury Library. there was a little bit of trickery going on because the community wants the name Nubian Library, but that's a whole nother story. But let me just say in closing that the work that City Life does is critical, because what's going on with the development is that this area is going to be transformed very quickly in the next few years with all the development that's coming in. And the residents in the area, you know that their, including myself, ability to remain here is going to be based on what we as a community do to see to it that folks don't get driven off, because that is the plan. So that's why we're saying that the name change is just the first step. And so when Judy invited me to come here for City Life, my car was blocked out this morning, but I got here. I felt I had to be here because it's important that folks understand that what you're doing is critical for the very life of people in this community. So I'm glad to be here. The work continues, and we're pleased to have you here in Nubian Square.
Thank you very much, Sadiq. Thank you for that. And next on the program is Amanda Covan from Reclaiming Roxbury. Give her a hand.
Thank you. Can y'all hear me out there? All right. My name is Amanda Govan, and I'm one of the residential representatives for Reclaim Roxbury, and I'm here to speak about the safety of BPS schools and for the kids to go back in the fall. And this is not a safe situation for any of the schools in the system. A lot of these schools, I'll move away from the speaker. Okay. A lot of these schools are about anywhere from like close to 75, 80 years old, and the same way that they remodeled and did the Ferdinand building, they could have did that to a lot of the schools that's already in the system. They've doing a lot of this cattle herding when it comes to us in general, and thinking that they could just shift us around and move us around, and just because we're used to migrating because that's a part of our culture, well, they could just go somewhere else. A lot of us been planted here, so we can just, if we all can come together and figure this out for the children. That's my 8-year-old. She's trying to fan the bee away from her. And they're trying to get her to go to Orchard Garden, and we all know the situation with Orchard Garden and Methadone Mile, and I feel like I shouldn't have to sacrifice my child for a semi-decent public education. I was her teacher for like the past close 4.5 months due to the remote learning online and stuff. So I feel at this point in the game, a lot of the stuff should have been upgraded already. A lot of these schools should have been upgraded already. A lot of these things, if I remember how J.J. Hurley used to look when I was her age, and this was back in the 80s when crack cocaine was high, and it still looks the same in this 2020, like a lot of this stuff is ridiculous. All of this funding that is going to their pocket and is not going to them, this is not a fair shake. It never been a fair shake. A lot of this has to stop. A lot of this has to stop. I've been speaking out on a lot of these different issues, and I know y'all recognize my face from City Hall and the private testimonies and stuff like that, but a lot of these issues affect my children, your children, nieces, nephews, cousins, a lot of us. We can't sacrifice our children because of COVID-19 and, oh, let's just see if they'll survive this. A lot of us aren't even surviving this already. They just expect for us to just sit at home and, yeah, stay in the house. What about groceries? What about laundry? What about basic living essentials? Like, a lot of this stuff has to stop. Even though we're supposed to weed out the weak, due to our genetic coding, we all know that Africans are not weak. We all know that due to a lot of the movements of Black Lives Matter, if it wasn't for Black lives, all lives wouldn't be on this planet. So we have to really recognize the real paradigm shift that's really happening right now. And if we don't step forward, align ourselves, and really come together to make change, it's going to be more of the same, and it shouldn't be more of the same. A lot of the city is like the same from when I was her age, and it shouldn't even be that way, and I'm raising my children here now. A lot of this should not be the same. It should have been upgraded from the 90s. But when it comes to a lot of this money being funded into these folks' pockets and not to our pockets to make our communities better, then there's a problem. A lot of the stuff out here, I essentially don't agree with. One of the things I don't agree with is with the Boston Public Schools Committee and how a lot of the people that are on those boards don't represent us. You can't say that you're here for the brown and black students and you don't look like neither one of them. And I just feel like when it comes down to it, even though we're here and we're organized and we're coming together now, we need to be that united front to protect the children, basically. So in the end, when we become of that age, we have to sit down and pass the torch to them, they're more than likely to take it and carry on. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for that, Amanda. Very well explained. And her beautiful daughter. Give her a hand, because she was good. She stood there and listened to her mommy. Thank you so much. Next, we'll have Katie from White Coats for Black Lives. Just give her a hand.
Hi, I'm Katie Himmelstein. I'm a resident physician at Massachusetts General Hospital, and I'm also a primary care doctor in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And I'm also here today on behalf of the national organization White Coats for Black Lives, which is a medical student and doctor organization started in 2014 that's fighting for racial justice in medicine. And I'm really proud to be here today to share some of what we're working on. So, throughout the spring, I was working at Mass General Hospital in the ICUs, taking care of our patients there with COVID in the intensive care units. And as we know, those patients were disproportionately Black and Latinx patients because our Black and Latinx communities, which have already been devastated by gentrification, by police violence, by surveillance, have also been hit tremendously hard by this virus and been suffering terrible losses from this virus. And I was thinking about particularly one patient I took care of who was a man in his 40s, a Latinx man with 2 young children who, after 2 months in the hospital, unfortunately passed away, leaving behind 2 children in the care of a distant relative who was the only person who was able to care for them. I think our political leaders have been asking us to make a choice. They've been asking us to choose between education and health, and we know that that's the wrong question. We know that in this country, the wealthiest country in the world, we should be able to have high quality education for our children, and we should be able to have health for their families. Our children can't learn if their parents are dying, quite frankly. So we need a plan that accomplishes high quality education for our children and health for their parents and safety for their families. And it's time for our political leaders to develop solutions that are based in the reality that our communities, particularly here in Boston, our Black and Latinx communities, have been really for a long time missing out on access to high quality education, stable housing, access to health care and good paying jobs. And our leaders are really trying to create stopgap strategies, but we know, and members of this community have already been telling us, that we need long-term solutions that can last us through the pandemic, which may be years, and beyond the end of the pandemic. And so White Coats for Black Lives is just really proud to stand in solidarity with members of this community as we fight for the changes we need to survive the pandemic and to build thriving communities past the pandemic. So thank you for having us.
Thank you very much, Katie. Thank you. Next we'll have Ruby Reyes from Boston Education Justice Alliance. Give her a hand as she comes. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Ruby Reyes. I work with the Boston Education Justice Alliance. We mobilize parents, students, and teachers for better Boston Public Schools. I want to thank you all for coming out today. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the BPS plan, which is currently not a real plan. Some of the really bad parts of it are that they expect teachers to teach online and in person at the exact same time, which is impossible. And the worst part of it is that the other most damaging piece is that they expect schools that don't have updated ventilation systems. There's only 33 to 35 Boston Public Schools out of the 125. So that leaves 90 to 95 of the schools without updated HVAC systems. That is where we're sending our kids back. And just the same way that we think about unsafe working conditions and unsafe living conditions is the way that we need to think about these schools being unsafe learning conditions. And so for us at Boston Education Justice Alliance, our stance is that the majority of our students need to be remote only, but our high need students, the ones that need in-person services, such as our special ed students, our English language learners, our children that have not logged on, have only logged on half of the time, those kids need in-person services, but they need them in safe spaces. And so for us, those safe spaces, we don't trust that there are schools, and we don't trust that our Boston Public School leadership is doing the right thing by finding safe spaces for them. And so for us, there's so much happening in Boston around gentrification. The same thing is happening with the public school system. Currently, on August 5th, our school committee voted to hand over the green space at the McCormick School at the Columbia Point, Dorchester area. So they've leased it now to the Boston Boys and Girls Club. They're taking away green space from young people in order to develop a field house in a time when we need green space. And they're gentrifying that neighborhood. This was a deal that was made right between the mayor and these developers, you know, many years ago. And so if you're just as angry as I am, there's a school committee meeting tonight. You have to register by 4:30 in order to give public testimony. Tonight, they'll be reviewing a policy that basically got 2 young people deported last year. They're doing information sharing with the BPD, which is then shared with ICE. Tonight, they're going to be talking about that policy, which they updated to basically the same thing. Basically the same exact thing. So our children have the potential to be deported yet again, thanks to the Boston School Committee, thanks to BPS leadership. And so if you're just as angry as I am, please join the school committee meeting tonight. It's virtual, as well as become active in, I know that there's Boston Public School parents here, as we're talking about the